Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode number 102, with today's guest, Dan Norris.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments where we look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. Today's guest is almost a regular on the show. It's his third show. His name's Dan Norris, and he's got a book coming out called Content Machine. More on that soon. Dan and I have been friends for many years, and I've learnt a tremendous amount from him. Before we get on with the show, though, I just want to let you know that this show is brought to you by our book that Toby Jenkins and I wrote. It's called Web Marketing That Works. And the free gift for you, the listener, the 33 free marketing templates. So the URL to go to get your hands on these templates is bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Okay, so today's guest, Dan Norris, he's been on the show a couple of times before, 3 in fact, not like the 2 that I thought at the start of the show, which you'll hear soon. But his first book was called The 7-Day Startup. His business is called WP Curve. You may have heard of them. You may well use them. We've used them for a little while. They do unlimited WordPress updates as long as the update is under 30 minutes. And you do one job at a time. You can keep sending them as many WordPress updates as you like. So I think the price is around about $100 a month, and it's a fantastic service. They've got a team all over the world. So at any time of the day or night, there's somebody on hand to help with your WordPress updates. And his new book that's coming out, by the time you're listening to this, the book will be out already. It's called Content Machine. And we're going to talk more about that on the show. But the subtitle is Learn How to Use Content Marketing to Build a 7-Figure Business with Zero Advertising. So Dan's philosophy on marketing is very similar to mine and Toby's. Build good quality marketing assets, publish good content, attract people into your ecosystem by being helpful and generous and useful to people. So we've had a lot in common over the years, Dan and I, as we'll say on the show, but we started off many years ago as web design businesses, and things have evolved for both of us into a different iteration of the business. Dan's going to talk some more about that, but well worth checking out his blog, wpcurve.com/blog. And of course, the resources for his book is contentmachine.com/resources. That's enough from me. Let's get on with the show. My name's Adam Franklin, and we are joined today by Dan Norris. How's things, mate?
I'm great, thanks. How are you going, Adam?
Really good, really good. I'd like to welcome you back on the show. I think last time you had Toby interview you, and you've got me today, so welcome back.
Yeah, I wonder if is this my third time on your show?
Actually, it is. No, you've had me, haven't you? Episode 2 or 3. Yeah. Your memory
is that a record?
I think it is, mate. Your memory is obviously much better than mine. So welcome back for a third time.
Is that a record for the amount of times on your show?
Yeah, absolutely. You're top of the list with 3. I think we've had a couple of people on twice, but mate, you're the first to be 3.
That makes me feel very good.
Well, mate, we are now over the 100 episode mark, and I thought when we were starting it out, and I was asking you for all those tips, a year and a half ago, I thought, man, I wonder what it's going to be like if we ever make it to 100 episodes. But here we are already, and in no small part thanks to your help in those early days, encouraging me and giving me practical tips as well. So, mate, thank you.
Oh, that's very cool. Yes, I was just listening to one you just put out. I think it was 92. So that's really cool. That's more podcast episodes than I ever did. So you've passed me.
Yeah, because you had a podcast for a long while, and I've seen in your social media comments or email comments that you're potentially thinking about doing another one. What was your podcasting journey like?
Yeah, so when I started, in 2012, when I sold my agency and tried to start my analytics business, I just doubled down hard on content marketing, and I did all kinds of stuff. And one of them was a podcast that eventually ended up doing, I think, 70 episodes or something like that. It was an interview podcast. it was a really good way to network and get to know people. And I met, it's really funny because at the time my business was going really badly, but my content started to go pretty well. And I can trace a lot of, eventually I've sorted out my business, which we talked about in the last time I was on this show, but I can trace a lot of the relationships I built with influencers back to that podcast, like guys like Chris Ducker and you and James Schramko and Dan Andrews, people like that, were people I were reaching out to and trying to chat with on the podcast. And I found that a really good way just a really low friction way to get to talk to people. So that was probably the best thing about the podcast. And I ended up deciding not to roll with that podcast. I've got a different one for the brewery coming out that's going to be a little bit different. And I ended up just sort of going on a lot of other people's podcasts. So I think since then I've been on, I don't even know how many hundreds. I do like maybe 5 a week at the absolute minimum, sometimes a lot more than that. And so, yeah, I love listening to podcasts. I love being on them, and I like doing them myself too.
It's a lot of fun. Hey, I've certainly found podcasting to be one of the more enjoyable forms of content marketing for me personally, because as you say, you get to have a chat with people, and it's really cool. And you actually then have a recording of that chat that you can go back to and revisit. And of course,
yeah, I found that's true, but I also found it's quite difficult to scale the effort. And I sort of made a decision that I was no longer going to do the content for WP Curve. So I used to do all of it. And I hired a content manager, and that sort of sparked me to write this Content Machine book, because I thought that there's a lot of people out there who are kind of doing content themselves. They're always sort of wondering how to find time to create content, but maybe they're asking the wrong question. And maybe what they should be asking is, how do I scale content marketing in a way that doesn't require my time? And so that's what I did with WP Curve. I got a full-time content manager, and I set about how to scale that content marketing without me having to do anything. And the podcast just didn't really fit into that. We did a pilot for it where Kyle, my manager, did an episode, and I didn't really feel it in terms of where it was going. I didn't feel it was differentiated enough. I didn't feel like it was really adding enough value to our audience as much as our written stuff does. So we just decided to do the written content instead.
Wow, that's fascinating, because there's a lot to be said for written content and having guest contributors and a content manager. And that's one of the things I'd like to talk to you about today, that issue, not the issue, but the opportunity of scaling your content marketing. Because like me, like you, we've done hundreds and hundreds of articles, hundreds and hundreds of podcasts over the years, but you're right, there is a point where it doesn't scale. And I personally enjoy doing the podcasts, and I want to keep doing them, especially for the relationship side of things. And I just enjoy having a chat with people. But I've noticed with your WP Curve blog, since Kyle, your content manager, has come on, the blog has continued to go from strength to strength. You've got huge monthly readership because you share all those reports transparently on your blog, but you personally haven't written as much for it, but the blog still continues to thrive. So what have been some of the things, aside from, literally just hiring, not just hiring, but literally hiring Kyle, what are some of the things that you've put in place to help scale up that content marketing so that it continue to grow without you?
Yeah, so I could probably answer that question in a lot of different ways, but I've got a bunch of different resources I give away with the book, which people can actually get that at contentmachine.com/resources, regardless of whether they buy the book. So you can get all those frameworks and processes that we use for our content marketing there. But I think the thing I was able to do is to figure out what good content was for our audience. And that was probably the main thing, because I could have got a content marketer 2 years before, but they probably would have just done what everyone else did, which is to, try to create a lot of content, write every day, put a lot of posts on the blog, and just kind of hope for the best. But because I did it relatively recently and, a lot of years into my content marketing journey, by that point I'd figured out how to create good content for our audience. I know what they like. I know what they respond well to. I've developed a set of standards and a attention to detail that's almost fanatical, to a point where I know the quality standard that needs to be on our site in order for it to get traction. And I aim to get traction on every piece of content, not just sort of 1 out of 10. So if you're able to get to that point where you really do understand what good content is for your audience, it becomes much easier to document that and to delegate that, automate to some extent, but mainly delegate through processes and a little bit of automated tasks that we do with Trello and Zapier and stuff like that. But mainly just delegation through processes and training as well, to upskill people in so how they can understand what good quality is for your audience. And in the Content Machine book, I give people some content quality guidelines, which are things that have worked well for me. But I'd really encourage people to work out what's getting traction for them, because they may not be the same things.
Because you've made some interesting points over the years that your primary business, WP Curve, does WordPress updates for people, unlimited updates if it's under a 30-minute job. Yet the WP Curve blog doesn't really talk that much about WordPress itself because, as I understand it, as you've explained, I think your audience are business owners and entrepreneurs. So you spend a lot of time talking about things that are of interest to the entrepreneurial type of people rather than the WordPress geeks. So can you talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time on that in the book. And an example I give is, and I talk about this when I speak at conferences as well, is one example is I got an email from a guy who's got a backup company. He sent me this really nice infographic, beautiful infographic on how to do backups. Really well done. Not like one of those ones that are just sort of a blog post done in headings and icons. It was like a proper infographic. So he wanted me to share that with my audience, but I didn't share that with my audience because my audience just doesn't care about backups. Like, they know that backups are important, but no one cares enough about backups to get excited about them and share, an infographic about backups unless it was done in a really clever way. So like if I had a company doing backups, I wouldn't be releasing content about backups because it's boring and no one cares about it. I'd be thinking about who my ideal customer is, and not just the ideal customer. I'd be thinking about who my ideal community is. And I talk about this in the book as well. It's sometimes if you take that approach of picking an avatar, then you get a bit too niche with your ideas. And I prefer the idea of just picking a community of people who can generally influence your business. Maybe some of them will become customers. Maybe some of them will refer customers. Maybe some of them will put you in contact with influencers or just generally build your brand and promote you and create content for that community that they care about. And in our case, entrepreneurs, they like WordPress and they use WordPress, but I don't think WordPress is really on their mind all that much. Like they're more concerned about building a business, growing their business. They like stories from other entrepreneurs. They're like really highly actionable things. Like if they want to start a podcast, they can go to our site and find a podcasting guide with every little detail of everything they need to know to start a podcast. And that's the kind of stuff that online entrepreneurs care about. They don't necessarily care about like how to fix WordPress bugs. So that's the approach I take to it. But the other part of it is how much, like what content can you as an individual do well, or you as a business do well and enjoy doing and do consistently. So I think that's a part of it as well. Like I think I'd be quite bored and the business probably wouldn't do like only WordPress content very well because I think it wouldn't be that exciting. I think it's already being done really well out there. There's lots of blogs that already do this really well. So there's no differentiation, which is a big focus in the book. It's about a quarter of the whole book talks about differentiation. So I think you don't just take your topic of your business. You look at the whole picture to work out like, how can I create some content that my community cares about, that's different to what everyone else is doing and that's going to grab people's attention and encourage them to help your business in some way. Okay,
so once you've got the topic that the community is interested in, then what sort of breakdown do you have in terms of, I guess, as between Kyle, your content manager, and guest contributors? How many guest contributors do you have? Are they regulars? Do you recruit one-off contributors? Like, how does that all look for you?
Yeah, we do 50 split more or less. So Kyle does about half the articles himself and we have about half come in through guest contributors and it's across the board. It's people who reach out to us to do content for free. It's people who do one-off paid articles for us, who pitch us on articles. It's people who regularly do one article a month for us. But these aren't just normal articles. They're often like really long, detailed posts. So we have one during the week, 31 different ways to help with A/B tests. And it's like 3,000 words or something, really long and detailed, lots of nice images, really useful, actionable content. That's like the level of standard that we have on the site. We don't put stuff on there that doesn't meet that standard. So we don't compromise on that no matter who writes the content. And so normally what happens is if we want to arrive at 5 outsourced, I suppose you could say, pieces of content, then, we might start with 10. Like we might have 4 or 5 people on our list. We might have 4 or 5 people that reach out to us. And out of all of those inquiries throughout the month, we end up producing about 5 articles that are of a standard we expect on the site.
And how often are you publishing? Is it 4 or 5 times a week?
No, we publish about 10 articles a month. And I think we possibly could do more, but I also I want Kyle to have a target that he can hit reasonably easily and also be available to do other things like work on calls to action. I think we can, we get a better result when we do something like we'll put out a post about, say, the A/B testing tools. If that became a really popular post, create a specific lead magnet for that post that converted better than a general one would. So we'd create something like, A/B testing. So maybe a case study on A/B. I'm just making this up, but it would be something related to A/B testing, but also ideally something possibly related to WP Curve in some way, and that would become the lead magnet for that post, and that would convert much better than a normal one. So I want to have a little bit of free time for Kyle to work on that kind of stuff and content promotion and influencer outreach and a couple of other little things that content managers and responding to comments, just community stuff that content managers should be doing. So I think about 10 a month is pretty reasonable for us.
And then you're saying you have a lead magnet so that you're ideally trying to convert people over to download that lead magnet and then start to receive your emails. Is that the journey you take people on in these early steps?
Yeah, so that's it. And we have a process which I talk about in the book where we sort of identify the top pieces of content and make sure all of those pieces of content have a dedicated lead magnet. Not every article on the site will, because there's hundreds and hundreds of articles and it'd be way too much and overinvestment in time and resources to create a specific lead magnet for each one. So we've got a generic one, and then we'll have a specific one for the top 10 to 20 posts. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of which ones we've done. We only sort of started doing this a few months ago. So I think we've done 3 or 4, and we're sort of, as we go, we do more. And we also have a process where every month the admin team checks analytics to see what are the top posts and which ones of them are lacking a specific lead magnet. And then they'll follow up with Kyle and say, this one needs a lead magnet. So it's like a process that goes on and on without my involvement.
Nice. So we're talking roughly 10 blog articles a month, and then you've got a lead magnet on your top performing articles, which converts people over to your email list and your email newsletter. What sort of frequency and what sort of content are you sharing on your newsletter?
Yeah, we just do a weekly email still. We also have sequences in there for various things. Like we've got different email courses on various topics. We've got a pitch sequence that pitches WP Curve if we think it's the right fit, or if the system thinks it's the right fit and they haven't been pitched before and they're not currently a customer. So there's a bit of smarts in it for that kind of thing. And that's the stuff I go through in the book as well. But our main thing is just a weekly email of our best piece of content. I mean, there's so many different ways to attack email marketing. I'm not like huge on email marketing because I think like generally like people over-optimize for things like this and under-optimize for just brand building generally. So I prefer to build our brand and just build a big audience and, get that awareness out there as opposed to like specifically optimizing every aspect of our funnel. So the email marketing stuff is still pretty manual, but I think it's good. Like people on our list get a personal email from the founders every week with our best piece of content, and they're encouraged to reply and chat with us. And so it's still pretty personal.
And Dan, you've spoken a lot about your audience and your community. I've noticed that your broader community, like your email list, is up over 20-odd thousand subscribers. But then you've also got these Facebook communities that you've been cultivating, in particular to help build awareness for this book launch and your previous book, The 7-Day Startup. What's that process been like, and what sort of effort has it taken to get such an active level of participation in these Facebook groups?
Yeah, I mean, the groups have just been amazing. So I've got a couple of things. I actually just about an hour or two ago, I launched a private community at 7daystartup.co, which is a paid community for entrepreneurs and content marketers. So I'm going to sort of, get the best bits of that group and take it to a new level with my own community and have that as like a service that I offer people, or a membership. But the free group is still going to be available, and that's been amazing. Like we just started it with this idea of having ambassadors for the book launch. And it was an idea I got from Tom Morks. And again, I talk about this in the book because even if you're not doing a book, I think one of my lessons over the last few years is there's a percentage of people in your audience that are willing to go and be above and beyond what a normal audience member would. Like they're people who they want to do more than like and share your content. They want to actually advocate for you. Like they want to support you and get other people behind you. So that's what that group's been like. And I experienced it when I launched my first book, The 7-Day Startup. That book just exploded out of nowhere. I sold tens of thousands of copies and continues to sell. Like I continue to sell translations of it. It's still selling every day, like 30 copies a day or something. And I realized the power of that group. So I kept that group going, and I started a new one for Content Machine, but I'm going to merge them both together when that book comes out. So depending on when this interview comes out, the only one will be the 7-Day Startup group, but it'll have, at least 3,000 people in it who've been inspired by the 7-Day Startup or Content Machine books and are talking every day about entrepreneurship and online businesses and content marketing. Okay,
cool. So just to clarify, you've got like the free Facebook group, and then you graduate people up to the paid communities. Is that right? You'll still have the free and the paid options?
Yeah, that's right. So the Facebook group, I mean, it's awesome for some things. Like the guys will be launching a product and they'll put something on Product Hunt and everyone will get behind it and vote it. It's good for that kind of stuff. And because everyone's on Facebook, it's really good for it's really active in there. But it's also a little bit it's starting to get a bit noisy, and it's also there's only so much depth you can go to in a Facebook conversation, I think. And it's also not that good at allowing other members to connect to each other. So the paid version of the 7-Day Startup community is an online forum as well as a Slack group. So we're on Slack, we can message each other and ask questions via that and get help from each other, form masterminds, that kind of thing. But there's also a central forum where people can have long, rich, ongoing conversations and posts, case studies. And it's a much tighter group of people who are pre-qualified because they've decided to pay for access to it. So I only just launched that this morning. I've had a bunch of people sign up, so that's cool. But the paid one's been amazing. And I didn't really answer your question before about the amount of effort. The book has inspired a lot of activity, and that's been the most amazing thing for me. I definitely didn't expect that. And so I haven't had to put much effort at all into the Facebook group in terms of like getting people to it. In fact, I rarely mention it. I've started to mention it now though, because it's become so powerful. It's just growing naturally. I mention it in the book, and my new book mentions it, and it's just growing really quickly. Like last week, I shut it off so I could plan for the launch of Content Machine and my private community. There's now over 100 people waiting to join the group, and I didn't do anything. That's just people who are requesting access. That's
awesome. Now, in terms of the book launch for the Content Machine, you have been recruiting people for something called a thunderclap. Can you talk us through what that is and why that is looking so good at the moment?
Yes, it's not an STD, although it does sort of sound like one. This is one of those things that it just seems to be working like extremely well. Like, again, really surprised. It's a really simple app where you ask people to get behind your project, and they just have to log in with Facebook or Twitter and agree to send out a social media post when your project launches. So mine says, free today, new book, Content Machine by Dan Norris, build a 7-figure with business with content marketing. It has a link to contentmachine.com. So when people join the Thunderclap campaign, they're basically just telling Thunderclap to post that message on their Twitter or their Facebook, and you can customize it. That's what I've put in. So we set a goal of 100 supporters, and I got that goal, and it's like a 22-day process. It was 22 days before I launched the book. And if you don't get the 100 supporters, you don't get any of the sharing. So like a Kickstarter type model. But we got the 100 supporters within a day. And now I think it's been going for about a week or so, and it's up to 358 supporters and a social reach of over 800,000 people. So it's just incredible. It's going to make a lot of noise when Content Machine comes out.
So on launch day on August the 10th, there's going to be 358 people tweeting and Facebooking this information about your book launch, and you can use this Thunderclap tool to make sure that it all happens on the right day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to happen. And then I'm also doing other things to market the book. So on that day, I hope a bunch of other people will share it. And like you've mentioned, you're happy to share it. And like there's people who haven't read the book yet who probably would share it if they had read it. So I'm doing pre-launch copies to influencers and asking them to get behind it. So I think by the time the day comes, that social reach is going to be well over 1 million people, which is kind of crazy.
That's going to be huge. So Dan, with so many different things on your plate, you've got your 7-Day Startup book and that community, you've got your Content Machine book, plus all the content marketing you do yourself, and plus your beer company, your Black Ops Brewing. How do you split your time? And plus, of course, kids and everything else. But how do you split your time between all these different business ventures and content marketing projects that you've got on the go?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because I know I get told a lot that people don't know how I get so much done. I mean, that's part of what people tell me. Other people tell me I'm crazy for doing so many different things and not focusing. So there's that too. But I don't really know how to answer it because it just seems to work. I don't really work on anything where I'm not adding like significant value. Like I don't do any kind of admin or any kind of procedural stuff. I don't really do anything twice. I don't do any of the content on WP Curve. We've got managers that manage the team, content manager that manages the content. Anytime I need to do anything twice, I'll make sure there's a good process for it. And we just wrote a post on WP Curve last week about that. So I've gotten pretty good at creating processes. I've got a personal VA who's helping me with social media for my personal stuff. And then I've got co-founders in all the businesses that I have that obviously help me and do their bit for the business. So I only have to do the bit that's adding the most value that I can do. And I think also I just seem to have gotten to a point where the things I do get a lot of attention now compared to the way they used to. And I used to spend loads and loads of time trying to get attention for things. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. And that's part of why you do content marketing. But I think I sort of passed the threshold where I've built up enough trust in people and built up a bit of a network in a community where if I want attention for something, I can get that fairly easily. And I mean, that just saves literally hours and hours and hours and hours of work. I think that helps. I don't think I have any like specific secrets, but definitely working with co-founders, employing people sometimes before you're ready to, and getting very good with processes and delegation, and refusing to do work you don't enjoy and you're not good at are probably some of the major themes. And
so let's backtrack now. You said, now you can get the attention when you need it because you spent years and years building relationships, putting out great quality content and earning that trust with influencers and within your community. Remember back when we caught up at the Gold Coast probably 7 or 8 years ago, and we were both at the time running web design companies, and both of our businesses have evolved since then. What are some of the little victories along the way, little turning points or little moments where you've gone, yeah, that was really cool. I'm going in the right direction and things are going well?
Yeah, well, geez, it seems like a long time ago. I guess it was a long time ago. So I'd say some of the most influential things that happened, definitely meeting you. So you and Toby and Brendan Sinclair were like two of the first people I saw doing content marketing, and just having that approach, like that sort of generous, like when you met with me that day, I was like really surprised. Like I thought you were famous, and like, I mean, you are famous. And so like, this is what I was thinking at the time. This guy's like famous web guy. I can't believe he's meeting with me. And then he meets with me and then offers to link to me on my website. Like I couldn't believe that. And Brendan did the same thing. And so you two guys were like opened my eyes to like what was possible in terms of just being generous in business and creating content, giving it to people and doing that with confidence, as opposed to just seeing business like a dogfight where you just, competing with everybody. Like we were, I mean, we weren't really competing, but, we're in the same industry doing the same thing effectively.
To the outsider, people would probably look at us and go, oh, you do the same stuff in the same market. You guys are competitors.
Yeah.
But we never saw it that way, hey?
No, but also like you were in a much, like I really had nothing at that point. I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't really have a very big business. I wasn't really employing that many people. I was really stuck actually at that point. I didn't know what to do. You had a lot more to lose, but you were still generous enough to do that. So that was definitely a turning point for me. I think just getting my head around the fact that you can run a business like that. And I actually start Content Machine with the book with, if you aren't good at, like if you suck at sales, can you be an entrepreneur? And for years I thought that you couldn't, because being an entrepreneur is all about like hardcore dogfighting, competition and going out and selling shit. And eventually I figured out that you could. And these days, I look back on that and think like it's quite nice now that I don't have to be a salesperson. I don't have to be like a hardcore entrepreneur type like a Richard Branson or a Steve Jobs. I can just do a lot of good work, build a lot of trust over time, be confident, create value, and eventually things become a lot easier if you do it well. And so that was a big turning point. I mean, my first blog post I think was like 2009 maybe. So it's always a big point when you actually start doing something instead of talking about it. So I mean, it's a terrible post. I'm sure your first post was probably not that great either. But getting started in anything is a big turning point. And obviously starting WP Curves, deciding to sell my agency eventually, starting WP Curve in 2013 has been the biggest thing, because it's the only thing I've really ever done that's been successful. And it's enabled me to do so much else, including writing 2 books, starting a brewery, starting a live chat, plugging in a private membership, speaking at events around the world, writing a bunch of content, God knows what else. So it's been a crazy journey, but they're probably the big highlights.
Yeah, totally. How have you found the conference speaking?
Well, it's not something that comes naturally, and it's something I really had to work on. I just did a 3-day course on presenting, and I just threw myself in the deep end. The end of last year, I spoke at one conference, and then I spoke at another, and then I went over to Bangkok and spoke at that. I spoke at a conference in Sydney, just went to the Philippines and spoke there. I'm speaking in Brisbane next week. The week after, I'm speaking at ProBlog on the Gold Coast, and then Melbourne later in the month. I just threw myself in the deep end and just, I guess, backed myself to figure it out eventually. And I think it's getting easier. The first one actually was very scary beforehand, but as I was talking, I remember thinking, it's really not that bad. But yeah, there's been ups and downs. I think overall, it's been an amazing experience. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do it, and I'll definitely do more of it, but it's still quite challenging for me.
It's kind of just like content marketing or podcasting or blogging, but just like in real life, in real time, in person, hey?
Well, it is, but it just seems like content marketing or like blogging specifically, sitting behind your computer and writing stuff, like there's very little that can go wrong with that. So it's you can be in your shell and do that and not be too worried. And I did that for a lot of years, but I think the power of getting out in front of people and like the authority you get when you go to a conference and you speak at that conference as opposed to just rocking up is just a total game changer. The relationships are a game changer. The ability to spread your message is just second to none, like in terms of really impacting people around you, especially local people if you're doing it in your local area. So it's a big leap between writing a blog post and presenting at a conference with a few hundred or a few thousand people. But I definitely encourage people to go down that path. I know you do it a lot more than I do. I don't know if I would do it like as a paid thing. That's probably not the reason I'm doing it. And I don't know if I'd be too excited about that, but I love it as just if I have an opportunity to speak to the right people and do it for the right reasons, I love taking that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm actually quite fascinated because your blog articles get way more than 1,000 people reading it, and your blog post is up there forever. And yet, to a lot of people, that doesn't seem as scary as getting up and talking to, say, a few hundred people, and it takes an hour to give a presentation, for argument's sake. Of course, you've got all the preparation and stuff that goes before it. But the preparation, the time it takes to create a blog post would be equally as demanding. And when you're speaking to an audience, it may only be a few hundred people, and you give it once, but there's no real permanent record of it unless it's videotaped, which is great. But compared to that long-lasting visibility of, say, a podcast or a blog article, you're getting much more people interacting with that content, and it's there long term. To me, it's quite a scary prospect that your work that you do now is continuing to be visible for a long period of time, whereas a presentation is kind of like you do it there, you're in the moment, and then it's all over. There's no permanent record of it. So it's interesting that a lot of people find that scary.
I think almost the opposite is true, because I think like what happens when you create a piece of content is that you have control over how long it lives and in what state it lives in. When you do a presentation, you lose control of that. Like you do the presentation and it lives in people's memories for as long as it's relevant to them and is in the form that you delivered it at the time, and you only get one shot.
Yeah, sure.
So content, like you can always change content, you can always remove old content. But yeah, I guess some people would be daunted about that. I think more popular would be the fear of public speaking. I think it's pretty common to be scared of public speaking. I'm not like very strong like social situations either. So like just going to conferences is pretty daunting for me. But speaking was something I don't think I ever thought I would really do it. But I think it's getting easier.
Well, I haven't seen you live yet, but I've seen videos of you doing them live. So I remember when I was running a conference a few years ago, you politely declined my invitation to have you speak because at the time you didn't feel accomplished enough or worthy of talking or this sort of stuff. Yeah. But I hope now, if I get my conference back up and running, then hopefully you'd consider coming along to our next one.
I'll definitely do that. So, the main reason I do it now is well, A, because if it's a group of people I think I can help and impact and share my message, then I want to do that. But also if it's for a person that I want to help and make sure the relationship's good, then that's why I do it too. So definitely very happy to talk at your event. And sorry I said no last time. But it is true. I still say no quite a bit, and often for that reason too, for like if I'm not feeling like that topic is particularly strong for me, or if I'm not feeling like I can really add, like I really need to feel like I'm offering something unique and that I deserve to be there. And I feel like I've got a good story now, and I think that's been validated enough for me to be confident enough to speak at events. So I'm happy to do that now, whereas before I wasn't really, because I kind of felt like a bit of a fraud. And I don't know if that's a good message for people listening, but that's how I felt. So that's kind of the reason I used to say no. And plus I was shit scared.
Yeah, well, that's a good honest answer as well. So Dan, mate, what else do we need to know about the book, the new one, Content Machine?
Well, I mean, it's bloody long. It took me a long time to write it, so I hope you like it.
By Dan's standards, that's probably 3 days or 3 weeks.
No. I mean, it didn't take me that long to write, I suppose, if you added up all the hours, but just the process of writing a book, like you know this, the back and forth, the editing and the formatting, and God, you just forget how long it takes. I can't believe I've written 2.
I can't believe it either. And then, of course, once it's even published, then you've got to start marketing the thing, and that's even more of a challenge than the time and effort it takes to write the thing in the first place.
Yeah, but I think to me, it's like the closure on the story. To me, it's a cool story for entrepreneurs that I was able to build this business that's now I think July, I think we're going to do maybe over the equivalent of 110 grand Australian dollars in revenue. We're a US company, but we think we're 80, 90 grand US or something in July. And 2 years ago, I was literally looking for jobs, trying to figure out where I was going to move. There was nothing. I literally started it from zero, just sent out one email, and we haven't spent any money on advertise or got any outside funding. So it's a crazy story. And the first part of it was a 7-day startup, which was how do you build a business without going through that validation step by just launching quickly and then learning as you go. The second part of it is how do you grow that? And how do you grow that through content marketing? Because it's a mystery for a lot of people. And so I feel like this is kind of the second part of the story. And it turns out it's a much more complex part of the story. It's a longer book. There's a lot more in it. There's a lot more links, a lot more mentions. It took me a lot longer to write and put together, but I think it'll be super actionable, especially because the 7-day startup was sort of written for new entrepreneurs and maybe wasn't the sort of thing that existing entrepreneurs desperately needed. But I think this book is going to be really useful for both groups. So yeah, I really hope it's useful for people in your audience, and I hope it goes well.
Well, I'm sure it absolutely will be. I've had a read of one of the advanced copies. Excellent book. And the resources page that you mentioned earlier, just to confirm, was contentmachine.com/resources.
Yeah, that's up at the moment. I need to format that and get it all nice and pretty for the launch. But you can get the resources without any email opt-in, just free. Most of them are Google Docs, and you can make your own copy. You don't need to buy the book or put emails in or do anything. So that URL will be the same. And that'll be useful if you read the book or if you're in the community. But it'll also be useful if you haven't and you just want to get a quick download for quality standards or article writing guidelines or content strategy and things like that.
That's really cool. And then so the book, of course, or the Kindle or the book will be available on Amazon, like all good books.
So same as last time, exclusive to Amazon. They do absolutely everything. It's just seems to be something that works really well. The last one worked really well, so I'm just doing it the same way.
Nice, mate. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all those tips and insights with us today on the podcast and also in the book and in the Facebook community and on your blog. I've personally learnt so much from you, and on behalf of our listeners, thanks, mate, and have a good day.
Well, thanks. Well, likewise, I've learned a lot from you, and thanks for the inspiration, and congratulations on the 100 episodes. And thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure, Dan. Thanks, mate. And that is a wrap from my chat with Dan Norris. So his book, Content Machine, coming out, well, it will be out by the time you listen to this. Head to the resources, contentmachine.com/resources. Download all those goodies that he spoke about. And I love getting Dan on the show because he practices what he preaches, and he's very transparent with the journey that he's been on. It can take a long time to get traction with your content marketing. There can be a lot of times where you want to give up. And Dan was around at the start of our Blue Wire media journey as well. We've both been on similar paths in terms of our content marketing journey. And, he says there's times that he wasn't a successful content marketer, but he's absolutely knocking it out of the park now. And his WP Curve business, the success of his books, is really awesome to see. And what I like most is that he takes us all along for the ride as well. He's very transparent. He reports back through his own blog and through his book and through other podcasts that he's on. So we really get to see exactly what it's like, the highs and the lows with Dan, and he's very generous being able to share all that stuff with us. So no doubt you will be hearing more from Dan or seeing a big splash with Dan's book on social media. And chances are you'll hear from him again on this very podcast. But until then, keep an eye out for him. Follow his blog, follow his Twitter. He's very funny and very informative as well. So just to close out the podcast, I just want to say that it was brought to you by our book, which is called Web Marketing That Works. And you can get the hands on the bonus gift, which is the 33 free marketing templates. So head to bluewiremedia.com.au/book, and they are all yours. So Toby and I, we always intend to deliver actionable advice. So your feedback and questions are always welcome. Please let me know via email, adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au, or you can tweet me at Franklin_Adam. And if you enjoyed the show, we would love it if you left us a review on iTunes. Thank you very much, and I shall see you next time.